All right, I would like to welcome everyone to webinar number 2 as part of Thrive, which is all focused on webinars for joy and intimate relationships, which is a really important part of relationship security and stability, is how much joy the woman experiences. That's for relationships where there is a female partner. And I just believe that this is a topic that just hasn't had enough airtime or coverage in traditional relationship models, which is why I created this series. All right, so let's make a start. So today's topic is on receiving and appreciating. And it's really centered around healing from the defectiveness shame schema, but it focuses more on providing a positive healing pathway for the defectiveness shame schema into this different energy of receiving and appreciating. So I'm going to be speaking today about why I believe it's so important to cultivate this energy of receiving and appreciating in a long-term relationship. And I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you get some aha moments. And also keep in mind that, I mean, this topic, whenever we're talking about patterns or schemas from the past, it can also be triggering. And the reason why it can be triggering is because we're sort of bringing up unconscious patterns that may have been hidden under some layers for some time and bringing them into our conscious awareness. So sometimes that can be a bit of a jolt to the system when we sort of have realizations about these patterns. And we are kind of forced to think about how this might apply in our own lives. But on the other side of being triggered is the healing and the processing of the painful information that's been hidden, so that we can shift and change the way that we've been handling these painful emotions and memories. All right, so again, in this webinar, I would like to start with an imagery, because I think it's very powerful to sort of drop out of our heads into our body, into our hearts, and get the experience and the feeling that accompanies the energy that we're trying to cultivate today. All right, so to do that, I invite you, if you feel comfortable, to close your eyes. And if you prefer, you can have your video off. I don't mind. And we're just going to take a moment to close our eyes and take a few breaths in and out. And imagine that you are in a relationship, whether you are actually in a relationship with a partner or you hope to be in the future. Imagine that you are at home and your partner has just come home from work, and they open the door and you notice them walk in the front door. And see what happens in your body. What do you notice? And what thoughts fill your mind? How are you feeling seeing your partner arrive home from work? So if this is a relationship that is one that feels nourishing and secure, you may notice that you are happy and joyful to see your partner arrive home that day. That is, if you've been having a good day yourself. And you may notice that your mind is filled up with positive thoughts about your partner, about how you've been looking forward to seeing them come home. Or if this is a relationship that feels unsafe in any way, you may have a very different experience. You may notice some tension in your body. You may notice that your heart rate speeds up. And you may notice more negative thoughts start to fill your mind that are focused on recent arguments or feeling like you haven't been considered or taken care of. Just use this imagery as feedback to help you have that sense of what it might feel like if you're more in the energy of receiving and appreciating, or what it might feel like if the relationship feels unsafe. And this is just data or feedback that will help you to unpack some of the content that we're going to be exploring today. And so what you can do is you can bring your energy, your attention back into the here and now, back into your body in your chair. You can wriggle your fingers and wriggle your toes, and you can slowly open your eyes. Okay, so that was an example of imagery for assessment, just to see what goes on that you could use with your female clients to get an idea of the overall climate of the relationship. Okay, I mean, if there's a negative response, it could be that there's something particular or specific going on at this point in time that's got nothing to do with the relationship, that's got more to do with the individual. But that's something that you could explore or unpack with your client to understand, try and understand what might be blocking them from being in a more of a receptive mode in the relationship. All right, so let's move on and start to unpack what could be going on there with that blocking of that receptive mode. All right, so if we think about receiving as an energy, it's actually synonymous with feminine energy. So if you think about yin and yang, that there's a balance to everything in life, that there's a giving and a receiving to and fro, then whenever we're connected to more feminine energy, we're in a more receiving mode, taking it in, being filled up with life. So in order for the feminine part of life to provide nurturance or nourishment or affection, love and warmth, the feminine also needs to receive many things from life, such as support or structure, safety and containment, a home, a food, protection from harm. So you can see that there's really a give and take between the masculine and the feminine energies in life. You know, it's I guess the saying is we can only give from a full cup, or you can't give from an empty cup. If we are to give love and affection and nurturance, then there's something that we need to be receiving in order to participate in that give and take flow. However, sometimes in the past, women have gotten messages that they were only worthy if they were doing something to provide for others, or if they were in service to others. Okay, so they may have developed the belief that their worth is dependent on their usefulness to others, and that they're unworthy of being on the receiving end of other people's love and affection. So this can lead to an unconscious pattern of always giving and always doing to avoid the feelings of shame and unworthiness that comes when we're not giving and doing. In other words, when we're receiving. So if receiving care or love or support activates feelings of unworthiness, then we might compensate or avoid that feeling by just doing and helping all of the time. However, a partner with what I call healthy masculine energy, how I would describe healthy masculine energy is someone who is autonomous and capable and quite self-directed in life. This kind of person, whether it's male or female, this kind of person will not be seeking a partner to look after them in life because they're already capable of looking after themselves. They're capable of the normal day-to-day functioning of life. A partner with healthy masculine energy will want to bring their gifts into the relationship. You know, the gifts of doing, of helping, protecting, providing, and fixing. Okay, so I just want to say that this is in their nature. As much as it might not be politically correct to describe gender differences in this way, it's part of nature. And to block nature, to be in denial of the fact that different partners bring different gifts to a relationship, may mean that we end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Okay, so it's just in a more masculine energy partner's nature to be of help. Just like it's in the nature of a more feminine energy partner to be more nurturing, loving, caring, understanding, and attentive to emotions and relationships. So this is just part of the natural flow of things. Okay, and it's not so much about you know, that all women need to be connected to that feminine energy and all men need to be connected to masculine energy. It's more about just accepting and embracing whatever your natural essence is, okay, and not hiding it or drowning it or overcompensating for the pain of that natural essence. Okay, so in the situation where, say, maybe a female partner feels the need to just be doing and giving all of the time, that's the only thing that makes her feel worthy of love, that can lead to a female partner becoming resentful over time. If she feels like it's entirely up to her to carry the entire burden of responsibility for the household, such as providing all of the emotional and domestic support, or not feeling as though she can lean on her partner for support. So this is a recipe for resentment over time. And if this is going on for any of your female clients, then there's a good chance that the female partner is actually longing to connect with the feminine in her, which is that receptive, welcoming of gifts into her life. And she may have a block to receiving. And if that's the case, we might, as therapists or coaches, we'd want to better understand this in order to create more harmony in the relationship and to avoid resentment building latent down the track. Okay. All right, so how about we look at some common blocks to receiving in relationships? Like, what is blocking this receiving energy being embraced in our relationships? One block could be this feeling of being unworthy of receiving love due to shame-based messages in the past, whether that was at home or at school or society at large. And these shame-based messages can lead to the defectiveness shame schema, which is a overarching pattern that relates to how we see ourselves in relation to other people. So seeing ourselves as less worthy of love, broken or flawed or defective in some fundamental way. Okay. Okay, some other common blocks to receiving in relationships can include developing a narrative that we must do or achieve or give something before we are worthy of receiving love. So this narrative may have developed in household environments where there's a lot of criticizing, judging, or rejection towards the child, but there was occasional praise or attention for performing. Okay, so this is a really common childhood environment where that little girl may have received messages that, you know, she is overall defective, there's something wrong with her, but she'll occasionally receive love if she's being of help to other people. So you can sort of see where that message of unworthiness or conditional worth starts to develop. Okay, some other places, now this is at the more sort of society level where this block can develop, is from faulty and outdated messages, either directly, you know, said to the little girl in the house, or modeled by a mother figure, that a woman's role is the caretaker. That's her role in life, is to look after others, including all aspects of domestic life. And this is what makes her worthy of love. Okay, so just take a moment right now to get an image of the caretaker archetype in a mother figure. What does she look like? Perhaps she always has a pleasant smile on her face and her attention is going outwards, making sure everyone's comfortable, making sure that everything has been attended to, that the house is clean and tidy, and that everyone's in a good mood. So that's really the caretaker archetype. In comparison to that just being part of everyday life, of course, that's sometimes the mode that we're in, but it can take over the entire personality. You can sometimes, you know, hear stories from our clients where perhaps their mother was always in this caretaker mode, always doing something, cleaning, you know, would never sit down and be in a more receptive mode and focused on her own comfort, her own pleasure. Okay, so that's how it can be learned, is just this sort of witnessing that being modeled, and the little girl growing up and saying, oh, well, that's what it means to be a wife or a partner or a woman. Okay. Some other ways that this receptive energy can be blocked in relationships is when the female partner comes to view their partner as superior or above them in some way, which would mean that it would feel unsafe for her to receive something from a partner if she viewed the partner as superior or above her, because it would feel like perhaps she's losing control or she's showing dependence on that partner who is above her, or some kind of submission. And to flip that, also, if we view a partner as beneath us, you know, as inferior to us, therefore we're going to be always focusing on their flaws and their faults and our complaints about them, and not on the gifts that they could potentially bring to a relationship. Okay, so this idealizing a partner is really common if, say, your client grew up in a household where there was a dominant parent figure, and this dominant parent figure used criticism or bullying as a way of asserting their dominance by inducing shame in the people around them. And when a dominant figure can induce shame in someone, then that person who's experiencing the shame is in a state of fear because it's so painful, because they're afraid of being completely abandoned or rejected or ostracized. So they're in a more submissive position in the relationship in that moment. Okay, so all of this can result in this little girl growing up in this house developing some shame-based coping methods. And they could include putting herself down a lot. So she might learn that, well, other people are putting me down, so I should just adopt that behavior also and put myself down, because then at least I'll know what to expect. Another coping response could be that she learns to tolerate criticism or behavior that hurts, that is normalized, that she doesn't even think that it's something that she should be protesting about or raising. You know, it's just normalized, you know, this tolerating of criticism or behavior that hurts. Okay, another coping response includes staying in relationships only out of fear of not being able to find anyone else. So this belief that, oh, there couldn't possibly be anyone else out there that would have me because I'm defective, I'm unlovable, I'm not worthy of being loved. Or sometimes there can be more of a swinging in the opposite direction and developing overcompensating type behaviours, like maybe developing a sense of entitlement, or this sort of princess mode, or becoming very critical of faults in a partner. And if any of you are watching Maths at the moment, the reality TV show in Australia, then you might see a lot of this overcompensating for feelings of shame by becoming highly critical towards a partner. Because as long as someone is on the top, then someone is on the bottom. So it feels better to be the one doing the criticizing than the one being on the receiving end of the criticism. So that's a pattern that can often develop out of shame. All right, so let's move on to some shame-based messages that a little girl might have received growing up, or even in her adolescent years, or even young adulthood. You know, we're still sort of forming ideas and concepts of ourselves, you know, through our 20s as well. So it may be just relationships that occurred in young adulthood that could lead to these shame-based messages. Okay, so one message is that you are unlovable. And this is where the shame is attacking the whole character or the whole person. So the method that this message is delivered might not be verbal. It could be just looks of contempt from a family member, just this sort of rolling of the eyes, you know, looking over, glancing and sort of rolling their eyes every time, you know, someone is feeling annoyed at her, or being mocked or shamed or teased all the time, and never shown affection or love or appreciation. Okay, another shame-based message is you're too something. So where the personality traits are being shamed and the temperament of the child. So you're too much, you're too sensitive, you're too quiet, you're too loud, you're too reserved, could go on and on and on. Kind of depends on what the parents or caregivers are comfortable with in that household, and shaming any personality traits that don't exactly fit with their own temperament. So this is very common. You know, I've seen clients where the parents were more quiet and reserved, and they didn't know how to make space for a more feisty, loud, exuberant little girl. Or the opposite, where the parents were very extroverted and they didn't know how to make space for a more introverted, quiet, reserved little girl. All right. Another example of shame-based messages includes appearance-based shaming. So why does your whatever look like that? So that could be shaming any kind of appearance-related flaws or a different feature to their sibling, shaming about weight, height, teeth, hair, skin, clothing, all of those types of things. And this may become really important, especially during the adolescent years, because teenagers are wanting to fit in and be accepted by their peers, and appearance is really important at that time. And if they receive shame-based messages at this time, it could really have a deep impact on deeper feelings of shame. Okay, other shame-based messages include achievement-based shaming. Why didn't you get first place? So achievement-based shaming could include something about their grades, athletic ability, other achievement, performance-based activities, that type of thing. Okay, and then shame-based messages around sexuality. So why are you wearing that? Is a common one that we'll hear in the stories of our clients. So the shaming around sexual orientation, sexual identity and expression, sexual development, undisclosed sexual abuse, dating experience, sexual experiences. So there can be a lot of shame that is carried for our female clients, that they carry with them into their adult relationships. And therefore they feel that they need to cut off from or suppress a whole aspect of who they are, which has a really strong effect on this receiving and appreciating, because it can block any sort of sexual intimacy in the relationship, because perhaps the female partner doesn't feel worthy of having all of that attention on her. All right, so some negative beliefs that might develop from those negative messages, and they become internalized as a dialogue in the client's own mind, could include things like, I'm not lovable, I don't deserve love, other women are more lovable than me because of their height or hair or whatever. Insert any kind of comparison. Or if I let someone get close and love me, it's only a matter of time before they see my flaws and faults and change their mind and then reject me. So these are some negative beliefs that we can help our female clients to access, and we can start to help understand where they developed these beliefs. We can link it to the origins where they first heard those messages. Okay, so what's the problem then? Why is it important to know the origins of all these shame-based messages, and what impact does it have on their current relationships? Okay, the problem is that shame causes us to contract and hide in our relationships. It's one of the emotions that just doesn't serve a useful function. It's quite unhealthy if it doesn't get processed, because it really shuts us down, blocks us from this receiving and appreciating. So it shuts us down to connection and love, both giving and receiving love, because all of our attention, when shame is activated, is on protecting ourselves from the painful feeling of shame. It's a very debilitating emotional state to be in. And we go to great lengths to avoid feeling shame. We will do almost anything so that we don't activate shame. However, expressing appreciation for a partner comes from a place of emotional safety, which includes feeling worthy of love and also safe in the presence of a partner. All right, so let's now move on to this energy of appreciation. Okay, so showing appreciation in a relationship is a positive gesture that's usually given in response to receiving a gift or an act of service from a partner, or just even their presence. So all humans like to be appreciated for the gifts that they give others, obviously. So if we do something for someone, give them something, it feels very nice to be acknowledged and for the other person to say thank you, because it shows that they've received the gift. They've acknowledged what we've done for them. Okay. However, in terms of sometimes some gender differences that I've witnessed and experienced, it's certainly in my own relationships, past and present, it is common in many but not all relationships that one partner places more emphasis on being recognized for their output, and one partner places more emphasis on being emotionally seen. Now, that's not to say that everyone doesn't want both of these things. We do. But what we're looking for is when this is connected to the core sense of self or identity. So being appreciated for efforts or output is deeply tied to the masculine identity in us, as well as, males and females. Being appreciated for effort, like when we go to work and we are helpful and do things for other people, the masculine in us wants to receive appreciation and recognition for our efforts. However, being emotionally seen is deeply tied to feminine identity, sort of being recognized for being an emotional being, and that emotional expression being accepted and celebrated, as opposed to belittled and shamed. Okay, so what does the energy of appreciation look like and feel like? Okay, so right now you could imagine this open posture. So your shoulders are back, perhaps your hands are out, and it's this sort of open, as opposed to contracted and blocked off. It's quite warm and inviting and receptive. So in terms of non-verbals, I guess we would be making eye contact, there'd be a bit of a friendly smile on our face, and there's a warmth. The feeling that is connected to this energy of appreciation could be a feeling of abundance, or being full or filled up. You can just imagine the last time you had that feeling of abundance. Maybe on your birthday, perhaps, and people keep sending you messages, happy birthday, and that feeling of being full or filled up. Okay, and verbally, we might be saying thank you when we're in that energy of appreciation. Thank you, we're receiving that gift. So just notice what you experience in your body, and where in your body you notice this energy of appreciation. Perhaps it feels like your heart is full. So that's something that a lot of my clients will say when they describe this energy of appreciation. They're like, oh, my heart is so full. That's a lovely feeling. There's a lot of warmth connected to it. So this is an energy that I believe is important to cultivate for a female partner, because from this energy of appreciation comes many good things. The relationship can then sort of develop and grow, and the couple can experience new adventures together from this abundance of energy. All right. So some old coping behaviors that can block appreciation can include criticism and contempt. So this is one that's described in depth in the Gottman's model, being one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, where the end is near, the signs that the end is near when there's an excess of criticism and contempt in a relationship. But I guess in this webinar, or when you're using a schema therapy model, we really want to go deeper and understand well, what are the origins of the criticism and contempt behaviours? You know, what are the deeper schemas that are going on that might cause this type of behaviour to show up frequently in a relationship? Because we need to sort of connect to those earlier experiences of shame to understand what function the criticism and contempt is trying to play. Okay, so that's one behaviour that we'd be looking out for, whether it's coming from your female client or from her partner. It's something that you want to address. Whether it's that she needs to look at why she's engaging in that behaviour, or look at why she's tolerating that sort of behaviour, and whether there's been any boundary setting. Also, dismissing a compliment. This is really subtle. It's not something that you would think about has such a big impact, but over time, it can really impact a relationship, because say a partner really admires the partner and wants to give her compliments all the time and show their admiration. And if she was to keep dismissing it or writing it off and saying, you know, oh, no, I look terrible today, or you're just making this up, or you're lying, or it can't be true. Over time, that partner will learn to stop giving compliments. And that's not going to feel good to a more masculine energy partner if they can't give those compliments, if they feel blocked from doing that. Okay, another old coping behaviour can include saying no, just this sort of default, no, I don't need help, whenever help is freely offered. So it's this sort of hyper independence that we might want to explore, which might be different to sort of more genuine autonomy. So if help is offered, see if you can just pause, or get your client to pause and tune into, you know, would you actually really like help in this moment, but you just feel like it's unsafe to receive help? Or is this a task that you really need to complete on your own? So being able to discern between what is more hyper independence, too much being self-sufficient, versus genuinely needing to get a task done alone. Okay, this is really important, because if the female client or partner in that relationship is always saying no, then there may be this sort of development of too much independence in both the partners, where they're leading parallel lives. They don't sort of come together and help one another out, which is more of an interdependence kind of energy. Or another old coping behaviour could include apologising all the time instead of just saying thank you. So she might come home, notice that all the washing has been folded, and go into apologising and feeling very guilty, as opposed to saying thank you, that's of great help. Okay, these are small things that have a big impact on relationships. All right, lovely. So we're going to pause there. So we've really covered a lot of the negative patterns up to this point in the webinar. So we've looked at all the things that block all this lovely energy. And just wanting to see if anyone wanted to come off mute and ask any questions, or type it in the chat box, anything like that. Leah's got her hand up. So how do I
I've unmuted
myself. There you are. Great. Yes.
Yeah, I've just got two questions.
Yes.
One was something that you said at the beginning, which, hang on, I've just made myself a note. When you said about a partner maybe becoming resentful over time because they're it could mean that they're longing to connect with that feminine part of her, and there's some blocks to receiving. What would be an example of a block to receiving?
Well, just all the ones that I just spoke about then. So she
feels,
you
mean all of that, right?
Yeah, all of that. So she doesn't feel entitled to receive good things from in a relationship. Does that make sense? She's pushing away all the good things that a partner could potentially be doing for her or giving her. And then she sort of just does it all herself. She's like, no, I have to do all of this. I have to take care of myself. I have to, do all of the things. And then she ends up developing this feeling of resentment because she's so burnt out.
Yeah.
She's so burnt out because all of her energy is going into this giving and doing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yes.
And then the other question was, when you said about maybe that little girl developed a narrative that they must do or achieve before they're worthy of receiving love. Is it possible that, I don't know if this question makes sense, but there is a lot of pressure or to achieve and do something, but it wasn't really conditional on receiving love. It was more just, you're a family of doers, and so you still felt love, but you felt like if you didn't, you'd be lazy or something. Is that similar or different?
Oh, I think it's the same. I mean, the message is still that human worthiness is all about your productivity.
Oh, okay.
Does that feel accurate? Like that's just the unwritten story of that family, is that humans are here to produce and achieve and do things. That's just what we're about.
I guess I'm relating it to myself. I grew up in a family where I felt very loved and supported by my parents, but it was like, we don't watch TV because that's for lazy people.
Yes.
We have to clean and do tasks, and if you're going to sit around, you might as well read a book or do something productive. But I never associated that with not being worthy of receiving love.
Right. But what if you tested that out and sat down and watched TV and just had a whole day to yourself?
Well, in the past, that was guilt-inducing. Now it's not. Now it's pleasure.
Yeah, great. Yes. So I'm just wondering, more as a child, if you had this urge to play or do something fun, I wonder what the inner dialogue might have been then.
Oh, no, you must do a task first, because fun is second. Achievement's first, fun second.
Yes. So the unspoken message there is that you're just like everyone else, Leah. You need to earn your keep.
Yeah.
And this happy child part of you is like, but I just want to have fun today. And it's almost like there's a message going to her saying, you're not allowed to have fun. Your pleasure is not an option, or it's not important. And that's a sort of a message of, that your pleasure is not important or valuable. Very subtle and very indirect.
No, that's very useful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. It's really subtle because, of the way that our culture, our society is structured, is this over focus on productivity and less of an honoring of play and pleasure and fun. But it also gives us a sense of worthiness when we're engaged in fun and pleasure, and parents are supporting that and saying, what would you like to do for fun? That actually fills us up and we feel worthy of receiving good things in life. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. Awesome. Yes. Okay. So that's really good that you raised that, Leah, because even in very loving, safe, nurturing home environments, if we're affected by the broader culture and society, which says, life is all about achieving, then there can be some real hidden feelings of, well, I'm not worthy of pleasure or receiving good things because we've been conditioned to not take them in. Okay, that's beautiful. Thank you. Any other questions? I'll just see, anyone else got their hand up? No? Okay, well, please feel free to type them in the chat box too. Otherwise, we're gonna keep going now. All right, so now we're shifting into what we can do as therapists or coaches or in our own lives, indeed, to help cultivate this receiving and appreciating type of energy. Okay, so how can we support women to be open to the gifts that their partner brings to the relationship and allow themselves to receive love? Okay, so I've got a number of things that you could sort of consider in your work. Okay, now the first one is ending the unhealthy cycle. So if the old cycle is described as the one that goes down the left-hand side, so the defectiveness schema gets triggered. So how does that get triggered? Maybe our partner criticizes us or makes a negative comment or forgets to compliment us or something like that. Down the left-hand side, that activates shame in us, as well as any unprocessed shame, any memories of shame from the past. So it's flooded to the surface, as well as any sort of narratives that were connected to shame at that time in the past. So stories like, oh, there's something wrong with me, or I'm not worthy of love. All of that gets activated at a sort of unconscious level. Then the next thing that gets activated is that we feel unworthy of love and consideration from a partner. So we don't think that something could be different or changed in this moment. We just believe that we're unworthy of receiving love in this moment. And then down here at the bottom, all the coping behaviors that block the positive gestures from the partner get activated, such as being too self-sufficient, saying, no, I can do it myself. I'll do it myself. Being self-deprecating, so beating ourselves up. Maybe tolerating criticism, allowing it to occur, or being overly apologetic. So if you engage in all of these coping behaviors that don't resolve the shame, they actually just perpetuate it. They keep us in that state of unworthiness and feeling unworthy, and also contribute to a certain climate in the relationship where shame continues to exist and doesn't get healed. All right, so what we're wanting to do is to end this unhealthy cycle and go down the right-hand side. So the defectiveness shame schema still gets triggered. Okay, so we can't stop ourselves from getting triggered because we have a memory, we have a hippocampus, we have a brain with a filing cabinet of all the shame-based events that happened in our past. We can't just get that out and not have these memories. So we're always going to get triggered. That's okay. But we can learn ways to reduce the intensity and the duration of our triggers by following this pathway. So the first step is that we can pause and understand the origin of the shame-based memory that's come to the surface. Where does the intensity of this shame feeling really come from? And it's likely that it came from moments in the past where we were shamed and we were young and we didn't have the tools to stand up for ourselves. Okay, so that's the first step that we can do with ourselves or help our female clients to understand, what's the shame-based memory that's getting activated here. Okay. Step 2 is we can see ourselves in that moment in the past as actually being worthy of love and understanding and not shaming and exclusion. So not buying into the shaming or the criticism that went on at that time, to seeing that little girl as actually being worthy of someone's understanding and patience and an apology and siding with her as opposed to siding with the critic or the bully or the more dominant person. Okay, and then the shame starts to dissipate. So when we see that little girl as worthy of more love and consideration and patience than she was receiving, then we're not feeling shame about that girl, and we can start to give that little girl some love. The shame starts to dissipate, and that the final step is that we can initiate a repair and open up to a partner's love. So say if they did the criticizing, then we're going to feel more open to going back and addressing that criticism and setting a boundary, being assertive, which we're going to be talking about in the next webinar. Or if we were the one that did the criticizing, then we can have more of an understanding of where that came from and have less shame about it and go back and make a repair and say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I was so harsh. Okay, so let's then look at what this repair, mastering the repair, might look like. So mastering the repair. So step one is, if we've pushed a partner away due to this feeling of defectiveness and shame, then the work is to firstly acknowledge this pushing away, this blocking of connection, and recognize the hurt that was caused. So whether that was caused to ourselves or to our partner, to say, I know that you were hurt, or I was hurt. Okay, so first step is to acknowledge the pain. Step two is that we can provide some context. So say if it was us that did the criticizing and we're doing the repair, we can go back and we can say, look, this is my stuff. Because of some unhealed stuff that I've got, I realize that I've been pushing you away or not appreciating you. Okay, so that goes a long way to take responsibility for our shitty behavior and to go back and to make a repair. Everyone behaves in shitty ways in relationships at some point. It's, you don't need to be, taken to court over it. It's just what we do. But if we can acknowledge it and say, look, because of, I've got some stuff going on, or this is some stuff that I'm starting to learn about myself, I realize I've been pushing you away. I'm not showing appreciation for you. And then the third part is to just express that appreciation, to say, I really do appreciate, what you've done or your help. Okay, so this repair process will actually cause us to recognize any future times when our partner is showing up for us, and we are more likely to express it then, because of this repair has been done, and it's made it a conscious intention to foster harmony in the relationship. So the more we practice repairs, the more receiving and appreciating we're sort of setting ourselves up for the future. Because we quickly move through conflict, quickly move through blocking connection, and we repair things and get back on track more quickly. Okay, lovely. Okay, the third thing that we can practice with our clients, this is very powerful questioning techniques that we can use, is Socratic questioning. So what Socratic questioning is the questions that we use and ask actually open our clients up to understanding the bigger picture. And sometimes they can come up with their own solutions, their own answers to things, just because we've asked a clever question. Okay, so here are some examples of Socratic questioning that you could ask your female clients to help her understand more about sort of the origin of her shame-based messages. So say if she was describing a situation where she's just feeling resentful because she has to do everything at home and always, doing, and feeling quite angry and frustrated at her partner, then you could ask her, when did you first learn that you had to always do something or achieve something in order to be worthy of love? So that question causes her to reflect back. It does two things. Firstly, it causes her to reflect on the fact that she has this belief that she has to do things or to be worthy of love. And secondly, it causes her to reflect on who from her outside world did she first get that message from. So that it creates some distance from that belief. You could also ask her, what message would you had received as a child about receiving a gift or love or something positive? So say she might have received messages that, well, you didn't really do much to earn this, but we're giving this to you anyway. You could ask your client, what messages would you like to give to your inner child now about her worthiness to receive love? Okay, and get her to generate her own messages that she could say to herself that will start to heal the shame. You could also say to your client, what could you say to your inner child these days every time her partner does something nice for her or gives her something? So you could, an example could be, well, I could say to my inner child, isn't that lovely? And you deserve that. And it's safe to receive that now. You could also ask your clients, what would it take for you to feel more open to receiving love and support from your partner? So you're really trying to get to the core issue here. What conditions do you need in order to sort of feel like you're ready to receive more love? And if she says, well, I would need to feel worthy of love, okay, that's when we might say, okay, well, feeling worthy of love starts from behaving as if you're worthy, treating yourself as if you're worthy. So that's something that you can absolutely start today. Start treating yourself as if you're worthy. Start taking good care of yourself, speaking in a kind way to yourself, setting limits on your inner critic. So we can do that, and then we'll eventually start to feel worthy. Okay, it's very hard to just say, I need to feel worthy first. Okay. And then another example of a Socratic question could be, well, what would you need to address in yourself or in the relationship before you felt safe to show your appreciation to your partner? So she might say, well, I would need to address the fact that I'm doing everything at home. I'm just feeling too resentful, too frustrated about that. I would need to address that before I could start showing appreciation for my partner. You say, okay, great. Or I would need to address what my partner did a year ago, at this function, and I never said anything and it never got spoken about. I would need to address that first before I could start showing more spontaneous appreciation to my partner. And you say, okay, great. Well, let's start there. Okay. So I have got some questions. Okay, so the first question is, what are some ideas to entice a partner to be more giving in an expressive way? So I'm wondering if you mean to be more, well, firstly, we don't want to feel like we have to entice, okay? So ideally, we're in a relationship with someone who is going to at some point want to give their gifts in the relationship. In a healthy relationship, they're going to want to give their gifts. Now, think about the love languages. That could be acts of service, for example. Okay, their love language could be acts of service. So they might just naturally want to do things for you all the time. Okay, so I guess if you're wanting to cultivate more of that, then you would just show appreciation every time they express their love language. Every time they engaged in that acts of service or made quality time with you or something like that, you would just show your appreciation. but I'm also wondering if you're maybe referring to how do you get them to be more giving of affection, perhaps. And that can be tricky because some people, you know, it's in their temperament to be a little bit more reserved. So if that was the case and you really like affection and you really like physical touch, then I would be open about that and share that with, because that's one of your love languages. If you like affection, for example, and hugs and sitting close together on the couch, then I think it's important to own that as one of your love languages and share that with a partner and just say that. You could say something like, I'm big on physical touch. I love hugs. I love hugging. How do you feel about physical touch? And just create a safe space for a conversation like that to happen. Okay, where they might say, I'm not really used to hugs, or I feel a bit uncomfortable with that. And then you could say, would that be something that you might be willing to explore over time? Okay, so can you see just how open that kind of conversation is? So you're with someone who doesn't like hugs, you like hugs, and you just be honest and open about the fact that you're quite a physical, affectionate person. And what you'll probably find is if they feel like they're allowed to take their time with it and ease in, safe, and they don't feel the pressure to just instantly become touchy-feely the next day, but there was a bit of a process. I would imagine that in a loving partnership that you will probably find that that person feels more comfortable being a hugger over time because they appreciate your love language. I hope that answered your question, but you know, feel free to type in if there's another layer to that. Okay, now the next question is, if a child did well and got picked up for good grades and good behaviour, can that lead to a child to feel ashamed, embarrassed and overcompensate in adulthood and pick on their partner? Oh, got picked on for... Okay, so if they got picked on, was it because they didn't have good grades and good behaviour? Leah.
That was my question.
Yeah.
No, it was picked on for getting good grades, and like, so you have patients who have done well, but then they feel ashamed for doing that. And then I wonder if they become quite controlling when they're older.
So what would they be trying to control in the partner? What would they be trying to suppress in the partner?
I have no idea. I was thinking more along the lines, I don't know if it's suppressing something in a partner, maybe like highlighting the partner's defects.
Okay. So if they were picked on for anything, good grades, bad grades, or anything, you're wondering if that might translate into them becoming critical of a partner?
Yes.
Yes. So if they haven't processed that, if they haven't processed the fact that they were picked on and separated themselves from that shaming message and set limits, you know, say through therapy, and said, no, I'm not doing shaming, I'm not doing criticism. You know, it's a very conscious thing, isn't it? To get to a point where you say, I'm not doing shaming and criticism in my relationships, and I reject the idea that, or not reject, I don't take on board the shaming messages that I had from my past, and I'm also not engaging in that anymore going forwards. So if they did some work, then they probably won't shame their partner. But if they haven't done work around it, there's a good chance that, like I was saying before, you either want to be the one on the top, you're either the one on the top or one on the bottom when it's sort of more unconscious. So it would make sense to be the one that does the shaming if you don't want to feel the pain of being shamed. Does that, can you give an example of, you know, is this happening in a client that you can think of?
Yeah, so there, I've got this lady who she reports like that she's very driven, and
Yes.
as a kid was saying that she was just, you know, always driven, always doing the right thing, what have you. But in her relationships now, or relationship with her husband, she says that she finds herself always sort of ordering him around and picking on him. And so because on her schema questionnaire, it came up as defective, which to me didn't make sense, because this woman she's very high achieving. She doesn't talk about defectiveness or anything like that. But in this sort of context, she's very, I think, demanding of her partner and what he does and how he does it and all that type of stuff.
Yes. Okay. So by the sounds of it, there was criticism that went on in her childhood. Yes.
Criticism in the sense that she was picked on. I don't know if that's the right word, for always achieving and doing well and never sort of deviating from her friends and stuff like that.
Okay. So being picked on is a sort of a way of shaming, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you mock someone, you pick on them, you poke fun at them, it induces shame. So shame was then a normal behavior, I suppose, in the childhood. It was normalized. So you might say to your female client, you know, was it normal to dish out criticism or pick on someone or mock someone or poke fun of them? Is that something that was normalized in your family growing up? And she might say yes, would you say?
I think she would say no. I think she would say that her criticism and shame came from like kids at school, like bullies and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. Yes, I see. Yeah. So that happened, right. So you say, so in school, it was normal for you to get picked on. And I imagine that would have felt really terrible as a child to be on the receiving end of being picked on and shamed like that. And she would say yes.
Yes.
Yes. And then you might say something like, is there any chance that that kind of picking on, nitpicking behavior has spilled over into your relationship now? Is there any chance that your partner might be experiencing some of that? What would she say?
Absolutely, because she's a pharmacist. She works big hours. Her husband works big hours. And so she's always picking on, like, you need to do the vacuuming, you need to do this, you need to do that. Like, you know, you haven't worked hard enough, even though he has worked just as much as her.
Yes.
But she gets very nitpicky.
Yes. So this sort of nitpicky behavior is like a coping behavior. It's like a mask or a shield for something else going on. So then I would ask her, what are you afraid would happen if you didn't nitpick all the time?
I think she'd be afraid that nothing would happen and if her world would fall apart, that things wouldn't get done. That's what I reckon she'd say.
Yeah, so that feels like this block to receiving, because she feels like if I don't nitpick, he won't value me enough. He won't do the things that would allow me to feel relaxed and loved in this relationship. Is that right?
Yep, that sounds like her.
Yes. You say, okay, well, what would it be like then if we at least discovered that? And then if that happened, that we would address it more directly. If you stop nitpicking with him, and that opens up more of an open conversation from a more loving place where you might say, I want us to both feel relaxed in our home environment, you know, being in a lovely, orderly home environment is important to me. Can you see the shift in the dialogue?
Mm-hmm.
If she was coming more from a deeper need, making it about herself, but in a loving way, and not being shaming, but just saying, it's really important for me to come home to a house where it feels like there's a sense of order. And that allows me to feel relaxed and look forward to coming home. You know, is that something that we can work towards together as a couple? That's very, very different to the nitpicking, which there's no vulnerability in the nitpicking. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's good. I'll try that with her.
Yeah. And you could even do a chair dialogue where you get her to imagine saying it in that way to her partner in an empty chair. And probably that would bring up some stuff for her where she might become very tearful, because it's hard for her to imagine talking in such an open, vulnerable way to a partner. Because maybe she feels like, well, I'm not worthy of that kind of love or being listened to unless I was bullying them into it.
Yeah. No, that's good. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Okay, lovely. Okay, so hopefully you get a sense of those Socratic questions that you can ask your clients. Very powerful. All right. The next thing that you can do is you can practice imagery with your clients. So I'll give you a very brief example right now. So we did a little bit of imagery at the start. So again, imagine closing your eyes and taking a few moments to take some breaths in and out. And first, imagine that you are in a receptive mode, that you are open to receiving good things in life. What does that feel like in your body to be in a receptive mode? Then take that energy and imagine you are in a relationship with someone who does care about you and is invested in the relationship. What does it feel like to receive the good things that your partner is bringing to that relationship? Imagine yourself being receptive to all these good things, noticing the good things that your partner brings to the relationship, and not feeling the need to push them away. And just allow yourself to be totally filled up with love, this sense of warmth and appreciation, and the good feeling that comes with being taken care of when someone takes care of you in the same way that you are so good at taking care of other people. Just see what it's like to be the one receiving that care. You can just take a snapshot of that moment, and especially acknowledging the feeling in your body. And then you can slowly open your eyes. So I use imagery a lot with my clients because what it's doing is it's creating a body memory of an experience of a positive emotional state, of being receptive to love, and just becoming more used to that feeling, because some of our clients have not experienced that feeling before. But if you guide them through an imagery like that, they can actually recognize that they feel that receiving and appreciating energy through imagery, even if they haven't actually experienced that in their life. Now, that's something that they can then cultivate and practice over and over again in their, through their week, so that they're more likely to embody or show this appreciation in a relationship, because they've got a body memory of it. It's very powerful. I'm really big on imagery and using the imagination for good, for healing. Okay. So chair dialogue. So for those of you trained in schema therapy or Gestalt therapy, might already be familiar with how we use chairs in a very powerful way in therapy to get shifts and to get healing. So the chair dialogue that would be relevant for today's schema of the defectiveness shame schema and healing that and shifting more into being in that more receptive mode would involve a chair dialogue with the inner critic. So confronting the inner critic. And the inner critic is that voice in our head that puts us down and tells us that we're not good enough, etc. And sometimes it's just trying to protect us from further shaming, but it does so by giving us like small doses of shame, almost like to prepare us for the shame that could come from the outside world. But the problem with this inner critic is that even by inducing small doses of shame in us, it's still having a negative impact. It's still causing us to shut down, to feel like we have to hide aspects of ourselves. All right, so this is what it might look like. If you have 2 chairs in your therapy room, you can also do this online using telehealth. And even if they haven't got 2 chairs, I've used it with a client and I said, have you got multiple hats there? And she had a black hat and a white hat. And I said, okay, the black hat represents the critic and the white hat represents the more healthy side of you. Or get cushions, whatever, get creative. All right, so if you have 2 chairs, you would have them facing one another. One represents the critic and the other represents the healthy side of your client. Okay, so that to start this, you could have your client sit in the chair of the critic, whichever chair, and voice out loud all of the usual criticisms that they have about the client and all of the reasons, why she's not worthy of love. So when sitting in the chair of the critic, your client might say, well, she needs to lose weight before she's worthy of love, and she's too loud, or she's too quiet, or there's this about her or that about her. So have your client voice out loud all the things that the inner critic says about why she's not worthy of love. And don't say anything whilst the inner critic is just voicing it. You just sort of allow it. You could say anything else and anything else. Okay, anything else? So this is that's also very powerful because you're not rushing in with a counter argument because you don't feel the need to do that. Okay, so then you would invite your client to move back to the healthy side chair and sit in this other chair. And in this part of the dialogue, you're going to coach your client how to set limits on the inner critic. Okay, so you could ask your client to just repeat after you. So, okay, I want you to repeat after me. We're going to confront your critic now. Okay, so you would start by saying, stop. Your client is saying that back to the critic. I know you came from my experiences in the past. I don't need to listen to the shaming anymore. I am a big girl now. I can handle not being perfect. No one is perfect. I don't want a partner who demands that I am perfect. Nor do I expect my partner to be perfect. We all have flaws and faults. I am not going to argue or reason with you anymore. I like myself just as I am, and I want to let my partner love me for me, warts and all. Right, so this is very powerful dialogue, which, I'll give you the script for, which you can use to get your own clients to set limits on their inner critic. And without being very confident and speaking directly in this way, you don't want them to sort of argue with the critic, say, oh, but I am okay. And, because that feels more submissive and apologetic. We don't want to have that kind of relationship with our own inner critic. We want to be strong, set boundaries and say, no, I'm not doing this shaming anymore. Lovely. Okay. All right. And then there's just the daily embodiment of receiving and appreciating. Okay, so some just quick examples here of what that could involve is, again, using the imagination, our mind, by practicing thoughts and images of a partner where you're seeing them in a positive light. Okay, so this can be really hard if you're triggered, if there's a bit of a conflict going on in your relationship. As someone who has got an anxious attachment style, in the earlier stages of my relationship, I would frequently get triggered. And there was some tension in the relationship, or this sort of not very safe connection feeling going on. But I knew that I didn't want to engage in a really negative narrative about my partner and make him out to be entirely the bad one. Because we can really get sucked into these blaming kind of thoughts, and where we feel like we're the victim and they're like a bully or something like that. So what I find is a really powerful antidote to that is to practice positive thoughts and images of our partners, where we remember all the positive things that they bring to our life, not put them on a pedestal where they're sort of above us, but just seeing them as a wonderful human that brings a lot of goodness into our life. So I think the Gottmans talk about having, doing 5 positive exchanges for every 1 negative. So this would be applied to our thoughts then, really consciously cultivating positive thoughts and beliefs about our partners. And if we struggle to do that, then we might need to look at what's the behavior that's going on in the relationship that is blocking me from seeing them in a positive light, and addressing that at the level of the relationship, not making that be such a private inner experience that you hold on to. Okay. Also, another lovely practice that you could do, especially I share this with my female clients that are in the dating phase. So in the process of meeting someone new, I say to them, go out and notice the natural giving and receiving that goes on in life. And if you're the sort of person that's attracted to male partners, then go out and notice all the other men in the community, in society, that are giving their gifts. Okay, just notice this giving energy that they bring and be really receptive and open to that. So, I mean, I practice this in my life, even though my relationship, I've had my relationship for 8 years, but there's men in life that, want to show up for women and help them and do all of that. So I just am very open and receptive to masculine energy. So, if there's men that offer to, carry something for you in the shop, for example, I'll always say, oh, thank you so much, and receive that kind of support as opposed to blocking that. Okay, so just keep in mind that different people bring different gifts to the relationship. So it's really important to know what your gifts are. So that might be, understanding and nurturance. So give that freely, but also know what gifts your partner brings. Might be more acts of service, for example, like my partner, he's always fixing things around the house. He's not very emotionally expressive, but it's about recognizing those gifts frequently. Okay, and then overall, we want to develop a new narrative to heal this defectiveness shame schema. So a new narrative often starts out with the words even though. So even though in the past I got negative shaming messages about my worthiness, I am now open to receiving love and welcoming it in. Okay. So just being more open and opening yourself up to receiving more love and goodness from a partner as well as from life. Okay. And this could be something that you need to practice. It could be a narrative shift. You may need to develop your own new narrative to support this shift. And the more our narrative can sort of take into account what's gone on in the past, the more powerful it's going to be, because we can get that separation from shaming messages in the past. All right, so that brings us to the end of today's webinar. And I really enjoyed talking about this topic of receiving and appreciating. I really believe it's an important energy to cultivate in long-term relationships. It has the opposite energy of resentment, which is going to cause us to shut down and block the good things that a partner might bring to a relationship. And it's also going to help us to heal from the defectiveness shame schema and start to see ourselves as more worthy of love. All right, so any final questions from anyone before we get going today? Please feel free to put your hand up, or you can even just come off mute. Yes, Phoebe.
Were there slides? I think, can you send the slides or a copy of?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So you were seeing just the images today? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. So then there's sort of written summary to accompany that. So same as the last webinar, you'll get a copy of the slides and also a summary of all the written content. So you can kind of go over it again in your own, you know, and take notes and highlight bits. All right. Yeah, anyone else got any questions for today? Okay, so I think we're good. Lovely to connect with all of you again, and I look forward to seeing you at our next webinar, which is on Thursday, 14th of April, on boundaries and assertiveness. So this is really focused on how to sort of step into our own power and deal with interpersonal tension and hold our ground in the face of conflict. Really important skill. All right, lovely. My pleasure, everyone. Okay, and see you all soon.